Okay, we're going to do one about the Madeline era of the last ice age. So we're reaching back a little farther than Younger Dryas, even in coming about in 18 or 20,000 years BC, and a finding that was there that's somewhat of an Oopart. We'll get into that a moment, but after reading through the article and then coming it to the top of it and deciding maybe I'll take this picture or that picture and make it the opening shot, they opened it with a mammoth, and I was thinking, man, they should have done the bracelet and not the mammoth, or this, that, and the other. And then I thought about it for a minute, and I said, no, they were right. They should have done it about the mammoth. For the mammoth is a creature that we no longer have, but at one time played an extremely important part in our survival. And whenever I was a kid, I was led to believe, as many were, that we killed off all the mammoths and stuff right there at, oh, accidentally, the age that the whole area was becoming much more habitable for themselves. For they could go up into the ice area and stuff, but they have to eat a lot of grasses and things like that. So they were not made to be in the Arctic as necessarily, but on the edge. Well, if we look at it, on the edge was way, way much lower during the Ice Age, and the height of the Ice Age, which is kind of what we're talking about, from there going back many tens of thousands of years. The ocean was at its lowest point, and the Ice Age was at its height. And so places like Egypt got snow. Well, that's really nothing weird, for Egypt's even gotten snow in our big global warming here just a few years ago. In fact, I did a video on it because somebody called me a liar, and all you had to do is look it up, and there's news footage of it. But at the same time, it would have snowed a whole lot more there, and there would have been a whole lot more ice to form this strange liquid that becomes solid, a firmament idea, that there was firmament above and firmament below. Might have been a concept which, it seems to me, especially through the ancient Sumerians, might have been a concept they had of ice in its frozen over state and how it was much above and below. And kind of weirdly, they describe it in a way that's kind of like, yeah, it's backed off now and it's doing this thing for us. Maybe that's just me reading into it. But we were taught that we killed all these guys off, and ironically, it was exactly at a time that they could easily have sustained themselves, and it would have been a fruition for them. And this would not have been a fruition for the people that were trying to go after them at this time in any way. So they tried to show Salutrian points and things like that, and Clovis, and hey, that's, able to do this bigger animal attacking type thing, and tried to put it all together. And sure, they can do that, but the amount of herds they had going on really exceeds any ability that the people could have done if they were exclusively living off of it, and they weren't. In fact, just the opposite, it seems, for it would have been a rarer thing. Taking on a creature like this is extremely rare. I don't know if any of y'all have, surely you've seen an elephant in a zoo or someplace like that, but I was able to go to one of the last Barnum and Bailey zoos, circuses they had, and we had a special meet and greet that we were able to see this elephant who could do math and a few other tricks, along with just the circus tricks you could do. And he also painted pictures. And it was kind of famous. People would sometimes buy these pictures and stuff and everything. He would choose colors and do things and paint this little picture. Didn't look like what his Noah was doing or anything, but after he got through with it, it looked good as any modern art graph that you would see and stuff. In fact, they made a joke about it. But when they came in, they let the thing walk around through us, and it knew what it was doing. It was almost like a ceremony. It had done this hundreds of times. and it slowly walked around one of the rings. What we did was we went up to the center ring of the three-ring circus there and got to stand on the ring with children and everything. And this thing came in and walked all around us. We got to feel it, and it wanted you to do so. It was like it knew it was supposed to be, and it was some kind of praise situation. It was weird, but you could see that it had this going on. And I looked directly in its eyes and smiled, and whenever I did, you could see an emotion in this thing looking at me, to where it understood, after dealing with people hundreds of times, the emotion I was going through. And I rubbed against it, and they have these hairs that stick out of it that are quite coarse. It's an immense animal. It's an incredible thing to be, I've been around cows and horses a whole bunch. And then to see something like this for a horse, just stands up this tall to a mammoth. And some of these guys are much bigger than the elephants that we have today, of the Indian elephant and everything. But elephants, in their various forms, were at one time all the way, of course, through India and places that we still know they are today, in the Orient, which they've been pushed to due to desertification and peopling. But they were also all up in the north, and we know that they were in Siberia, but they were also across all of northern Europe. Yeah, they found it all yet, but there's a good concentration over near Siberia. Ironically, in the last ice age, there was an area that was very much still like this, with its background going on while we're at the height of the last ice age. In fact, in effect, the Bering Ice Bridge concept was in full flow, and I've showed you in places where now they figured out that place was much wider at points. It wasn't even that simple. So there was more simple for people to come across in that way. But we also know that well before this date, there was boats, and we've talked about that. But as a kid, you get exposed to this mammoth in many ways. My children got exposed to it in the Ice Age movies, the ones that's got the little weasel crazy dude, and they're all trying to figure it out and get through the last ice age. There was many dinosaur movies right during there, like Dinosaur itself or whatever. And those are great movies. And they show a connection of peopling and stuff like that, and it tries to make the gist of coming across of North America. But it also relates the humanity that was going on at that time. And it's one of the reasons I like those movies, that you can still see there was something going on like that at this time. And one would believe, due to the conservation of hunters and the way that they understand things, that it would have never been their cause to take them out. But being a kid exposed to it, you see those movies I talk about, and if you grew up in my era, you saw Snuffleupagus in Sesame Street and things like that. And so you got exposed to it right there. For all you do is take the tusks off, and this is Snuffleupagus with his little crown hat of hair, standing some 18 foot tall, perhaps. Huge mammoth bones. And if you take those tusks off, those are able to make the awning to a house. And I've shown you, even in my D&D game thing that I can go into, they have it represented in these people of barbaric times that you're having to deal with. And this creature is much more important than we give latitude to, just like ancient lions that used to roam across North America, but Northern Europe in its form, and the Barbary lions and things that were all in ancient depictions, and they're all in their iconography. But you don't see them at all. Tales of the hounds of Baskervilles and creatures and black panthers that still exist, some here and there, and in America too, roaming around through Louisiana, some in Texas, and into Florida. There are still pockets of them. People wonder if there's a pocket that there could be creatures like this even. Well, They found on Wrangel Island that they lived far, far longer, and it existed on this exclusive point, and it become, because of that, become diminished in size quite a bit. And there are pygmy elephants that have been found over in Crete and so on, and they say, oh, okay, this is the tales of Odysseus, and this is the Cyclops, because that's the island they're talking about. And here's this head that has a hole in the middle of it. And so that must have been the big tail of it all and everything. Well, Cyclops had to do with more other things, and blacksmiths wearing a patch over one eye, and so they had one eye that was useful. Pirates did this same thing, and oh, well, the pirate got his eye put out. No, he didn't. It's so he can hang around campfires and things and talk, and then flip up that eye as he goes away and look and see in the dark well. So a lot of this has concepts that our people don't really go with. But let's look at this here as we talk about it and think about the mammoths. But also I want you to think about this gray sky that was going on back then, and the possibility for people having archaeoastronomy in those dates. For it's boggling when we get back and look at things like this. And this is just one Oopart of many I've shown you. Surprising Stone Age knowledge revealed on a mammoth bone bracelet. In Syvershina, close to the village of Mizin in Ukraine, is one of the oldest and most unique settlements of humans, and it was discovered in a parking lot. The now well-known archaeological site, known plainly as the Mizin parking lot, dates back to 18 to 20,000 years. In this spot, 2 intricately carved bracelets made from mammoth bone were found, which led to the unraveling of a fantastic Stone Age discovery. So they paved paradise and they put in a parking lot. Isn't it ironic when we do excavations just for roads and things, how in etching down to do so, or even fixing somebody's plumbing down and things, you end up finding, well, we were right on top of this the whole time. Makes you wonder what people have walked over and over across for the thousands of years and not known it was there. For a lot of these places we're finding, whenever you can take a drone and zip it up in the air, and all of a sudden you go, wow, there's a circle right over there. Where? There. You walk over there and you go, where? Over this little hill? And you go, it is the little hill. What? Investigating the settlement. In the beginning of research at this site dates back to the early 20th century. In the summer of 1908, in the neighboring village of Sarvika, today of Doznansk, archaeologist Fedor Volk and his disciple Sergei Rudenko hired a farmstead for a summer holiday. In the nearby forest, he found a small flint of obviously deliberate splitting. So somebody was flinting or breaking it up. It prompted the scientist to investigate the situation on the spot, and he was able to identify the find as from the Paleolithic station of the Paleolithic of the Magdalene era. So we're reaching back at that point. And so here we can see an artist's impression of what it looked like, but I could easily go to the D&D game and show you that Ice Age part that we fight in it, and there's these mammoth-boned huts. They're all going around that are covered with skins. And you can even get a super insulation if you did a skin up and then a skin down on top of it. And that also in tanning would make it waterproof. And man, there's some insulation going on there. But why would people live up on the edge whenever they could just go that way and over and through one set of hills? You wouldn't be having that problem anymore. The winter wouldn't be so bad, or things wouldn't happen. Well, other than the winter, just like in North America, or at least the north half of North America, every winter it goes through this effect. and it is the farmland, it is this, it is that. So you have to be living on the edge. Well, before the last ice age, it wasn't on the edge. Now it's not on the edge. In fact, the edge is way up in, you know, the north corner. It's no longer at the North American border. It's no longer, yeah, it's deep into Canada and going up. And every year we have huge winters. Well, not so huge anymore, but winters that drift down and kill off a lot of the bug populations and do the things that life does as it goes through its yin and yang of cycles. So these people living somewhat near a Paleolithic river, and there's settlement that's here. Well, Vogt presented a report of the findings in the Congress archaeologists later that year. In addition, as part of the exhibit, he displayed 72 animal bones, a sacred number, what that, and several small showcases of flint tools. Pardon me. With these clues pointing towards ancient activity in the area. The excavations that he had begun in 1908 were continued under the direction of Volk in 1909. His students, P. F. Minko and V. Harkov, were the ones that did it so. So here we find, and I don't think this, selected similar prehistoric tools for illustration. So here we can see different flinted things, but one thing that showed out to me looking at these is how well worked that piece looks right there and how it's very squared off. Now you could say this could be a common flinting, and sure it is, but it also shows a squaring of things. This piece here also shows the same thing right here. But these other blades, here and here and here, really here especially and here, but here, you can see that the edge on this side of it here is going to be an extremely sharp edge. And the edge on the other side would have been napped down to where it's not as rough, and they could take some piece of leather, wrap it around it, and then boom, it's a carving type implement. But you can look over here and we see a knife, a dagger, something you could hold on to. And they used bone weapons and did the same way, for you can take and shatter a bone and get a long splint end off of it, and then have the end that'll have the knob of the knee or the knob of the forearm, and get that going on, and next thing you know, you've got it. But you can sharpen it down good, but you can't get a blade like obsidian and stuff has to it. That's like glass. That'll cut the hell out of you. But back in that time too, they have a bowl here made out of stone, and it's a carved out bowl. Looks like where they would have been taking and pounding grain into. But they're not farmers. Well, Cro-Magnon's non-prognastic. Yeah, so he would have already have been well into grain and doing all these things long before. Do they migrate seasonally like birds do? Somewhat, because they don't want to go through the harshness of winter. And then they come back to their farmlands and back and forth somewhat. It's a hell of a life, huh? But that right there shows something too that we keep reaching back at. Human settlers. One of the most characteristic features of the habitation is the archaeologists found at the Misna parking lot were 5 round dwellings, like yurts, each with a diameter of 7 meters or 23 feet, and an arena or area of up to 25 meters square or 270 square foot. And here again we have something that has a walled yurt to it, but something like a teepee on top of it and things connecting. They don't know how lazily this was done. Could have been done a little better than this. They're not exposing the mammoth bones that are here in it, that are making up part of it and probably more of it. You can see one on the inside doorway. We recently looked at a video that shows dwellings very much like this in other places too. These dome-like dwellings incorporated mammoth bones in their construction and resembled the plague of the northern peoples. They were built of wooden poles covered with animal skins and externally lined with animal bones and horns. Nearby, there were places for processing stone and bones. In addition to residential and commercial buildings in this area, many original high art products from the mammoth tusks have been found. Sculptured idols, stylized female and Venus figurines, animal figures, birds, intricately carved mammoth bones, the world's first musical instruments ensemble, and bracelet. And when they say earliest or first, I hate that, because do you think this was the very first one, or did they have this going on for thousands or 10,000 years, and this is the earliest that you found so far? But also with this, bracelets with perhaps the world's first ornaments they talk about. It is not known how the bracelets were made, and in particular how they were bent using the limited technology available 18,000 years ago. So in just the bending and the way these things are made, they have no clue. But I'm telling you that whenever you take and boil a mammoth bone or a tusk, ivory, and then shave it off like you would shave off shavings, like running a plane along it that we have today, with obsidian or whatever, you cleave up a point and it makes curls. One would have to do this real accurately, and you could pretty easily get it done. The other concept they talk about is that you would take the length of it, and along the length of it, they wanted a bracelet right here in this small spot. So they would cut all the way through it, and then cut all the way through it, and hollow it all the way out to where it's just its left husk. This makes less sense. And they didn't do it that way. They did it the other way, and they bent this. And so they're using bones in special ways and getting them to become pliable and bending. And I'm telling you, a boiling does this. They're all forms of bone somewhat, but you can get it to really, with ivory, form these shaving abilities. Now, it's still an oddity where they go, okay, well, we know how we could do it today. And they go, yeah, these people had it going on. It's their jewelry of the time. You know, they're supposedly there's no mining and things going on, so these are the higher things of life and stuff, right? Well, if there ever was any iron stuff, it's long gone. Might find an orange spot someplace, just a rusted dot. That'd be at best. So the designs on this bracelet, which there's a few of them, were made with deep engravings and a red dye, ding, on flat plates of the mammoth's tusks. It's done with cinnabar, red ochre. And so they've taken a dye, which they realize now is kind of like the dye they used to make their tattoos with. And it's rubbed in the relief, and then rubbed back off, and only left in the gaps. An antiquing type effect, if you will. And then the rest of it's been painted, i.e. almost soaked, but it appears to be somewhat painted. It isn't so thick in the insides and things like that. With red ochre or cinnabar. And then, let me get that off of it here. There are perfect holes drilled into it along this part. So this would have been an armband type thing. And you stick on the armband, and then you would have taken finely cut sinews or string, which no longer exists, and run that through it in a zigzag pattern like you do on boots to lace it up. But they also show that, look right here how it flanders in right here on the edge of that. It does it here too. So it looks to me like there was a little piece of leather wrapped around that, i.e. like this, holding it. right? Whoops, that just messed it up. And in holding it there, drilled through also. And with that drilling, so it has a little piece of leather firming on the edge of that. So whenever they close this thing, it doesn't pinch your skin. Because it'll get you. You can get right there and just gink. It's going to get you. And of course, this is armbanded in, pulled fairly tight, cinched in, with maybe some sash hanging down off it, perhaps a feather on it or something. Well, that's going to get ruined pretty quick, but who knows what else. But if we look at the designs on the side they're willing to show us, it looks conspicuous to me and you, doesn't it? Well, it's worse than that. They figured out the angles and everything and what this actually hooks up to and the numbers, and using those sacred numbers that people did for things that make out to being certain moon phases and everything else. They figured out what this thing was for and way back when. An ancient calendar. Studying the bracelet, the Soviet historian Boris Frolov drew attention to the fact that the ornaments of bracelets have 5 zones, 3 of which are made of a meandering in the form of a swastika, that sacred symbol, and 2 zigzags. Studying the first 3 zones, in which there were 30 meanders, which in turn consisted of 12 lines. There we go with those sacred numbers too. And Sumerian numbers we talked about, but let's continue. The researcher also drew attention to ancient Egypt, where the calendar was created by the Egyptian priests in the 4th millennium BC in the Wayback Machine, and it had 360 days for a year, and that was compiled from 12 months. And later they began so it had 360 days divided into 12 months. But later they began to add 5 extra days that were not included in any month, and devoted this to the memory of the deceased, who end up being the planetary gods in other religions and people. And there's 5. And this is a Day of the Dead situation too, but that's more in October, isn't it? And that hooks up with the torrid meteor shower that works there. And it's amazing how different cultures all had this Day of Venerating the Dead around that time, but that's in another video together. Based on this, though, he suggested that 30 meanders mean the days of the month, while the 12 lines are the months themselves. And that multiplying 30 by 12, the result is 360. That is the ancient Egyptian year. From this we can assume that the Egyptian calendar could have begun back in the Madeline era of the Stone Age. And that's quite a revelation, but I'm telling you that it definitely goes back before the Egyptians, for we've looked at the Sumerians, and they're the ones that came up with the 360 thing. Or were they? For it just seemed to pop up with them like popcorn. And we've discussed sacred geometry and sites as far back as Göbekli Tepe, and where these people would have had this concept. And it has to work on a ball, because some of these are horizon concepts and other ones are in the sky at a certain point. And because it's swirling around and going around at a certain time on a certain day, it doesn't work any other way. Oh, you could be a frisbee. Do you think you're on a frisbee? So I got caught up here earlier whenever he was caught at it, but here we have that 360 days. and there's 360 degrees in a circle. The sun moves 1 degree per day, and this is a delineation of time itself that the Sumerians seem to take and get all worked out and click on like a clock, and where time began. So when we look at a biblical tale of things coming at 4000 BC, there's a lot that happened at that point, and that's where Adam is supposed to be. But when we look at genetics, we find an actual Adamic person of genetics, which goes way back before that. For yeah, there were humans on the planet, and how far does it go back? And it's quite different. So it was a moment in time, as I've discussed in some of my biblical things, and that there's graspings at this moments in time, and people are looking at it in the Wayback Machine as one moment sometimes. But when you look at this here and the 30 meanders of the day, well, that has to do with the moon cycle, and each moon cycle, and 12 of them, and it leaves over 5 days working that way. The other way, if you work it exclusively lunar cycle, leaves back 11 days. And when harvest used to be on September, there was 11 days left in between, and then it goes. So what would that do? Well, actually, that was sacred too, because on the 12th day, that was New Year, and it all began again. Shows you why September 11th was kind of more important than people give it levity of. Subsequently, the researcher focused on the 2 zones, which consist of zigzag lines. In the first zone, 6 zigzags on 7 lines in each, therefore 42 lines. And isn't that a sacred number? And didn't they figure that out in the universe? In the second zone, 8 zigzags on 7 lines, only 56 lines here. And in general, there are 14 zigzags with 98 lines. Frolov knew that in the archaic lunar calendar of the people of the Chukchi, living in the far east of Asia, that there were 14 weeks of 7 days, and a total of 98 days worked in their calendar. And yeah, well, that number works out sequentially. Yep. So, and that's something that they had. And what do they look like? Well, they're showing you here is somebody that looks very oriental somewhat. The child has an extreme low forehead, but there appear to be, what are you going to do now? Seriously, it's going to restart after all this. Really? Don't know why it does that. Well, I can guess. So let's go back here. Are you gonna load? Sorry, guys. Hey. Yes, look at that design thing again. Compound swastikas on the Oopart, but they aren't showing that directly. Egyptian calendar, 360. Chukchi people. And so here we have these similar round yurts. You look over here and there's this person with red hair and blonde hair, so there's apparently trading going on here. And this is some people that you'd kind of like look at as being an Eskimo, Aleutian type. Something going on. Huh. And that's their home near the Bering Strait area. Thus, before the researcher emerged the ancient lunar solar calendar, you can imagine the surprise to other scholars when they found out that the bracelet is an ancient calendar. Yeah, that's pretty wicked. But can you imagine people saying that there was people like this and the Amerindians that were able to go across the Bering Strait right over there and into Americas, but there's these people that are there and they're more advanced, and they didn't have the ability to do it in any way, shape, or form. And these people had these little canoe things, and these people got there with something more advanced. And that's weird. Another ancient calendar, however, This is not the only Paleolithic complex where the oldest calendar was found. In 1871, a Paleolithic station was found between the village of Dukov and Ginci, now Lubinsky, district of the Poltava region, excavations of which began in 1873 by the Lubinsky archaeologist and teacher F.I. Kaminsky. And I'm probably destroying these names. But so they found this out in the middle of nowhere, and you look at it and you go, okay, I know what they're doing there. They're growing weed out in some little greenhousey thing. And it's like, nope, that's an archaeological site they're protecting now that they excavated it out and working on it. That's the way they quite often look. But one wonders, right below my feet right now where the picture's being taken, people hang out there too? Even though you find these two incredible sites right there, it's amazing what might be in between the two, or just over here to the right, or somewhere right over here. These trees didn't used to be there, by the way. Here's a little mound over here. I wonder what that is. Hey, none of these trees used to be here. Wonder if we can LiDAR this area around here and see what's going on. But Paleolithic parking in the village of Ginci. All the attention to this parking lot attracted academician Vladimir Vernadsky as the researcher of the antiquity of Poltava, blah, 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 num, 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 in 1915. During the expedition of the Natural History Museum of the Poltava province, excavation was granted one of the dwellings of Ginci late Paleolithic staples, organized by VM, which produced ancient materials. I'm not going to take a shot at that one. The excavations of the Ginci parking lot are carried out to this day, and most valuable find which was found there is an engraved tusk of a mammoth aged 10 to 15,000 years, so the younger Dryas are before. In the basis of studies by the American historian and archaeologist Alexander Mearshak, it was found that the alternation of the long and short marks on the tusk is a lunar calendar which reflects the observation of the primitive man in the phases of the moon. And I did a video on this about 2.5 years ago as part of a three-part or three things shoved into it, talking about ancient things, not too long after I did Kamyana Mohila at 22,000 BC, showing a person on a horse, and mammoths around, and things going on, and like, what? Unfortunately, and writing, by the way, and writing about Inanna, and sacrifices, and animals, and yeah. Unfortunately, I need to do another video on that, for I have some more connectives now. For at that time, I felt like any of those things that I would have been saying would have been a little far-reaching. But now that we've rolled through it twice, and more things have come to light, it makes a lot more sense to add those in now. And I'll probably do one here real shortly. Unfortunately, though, at a key moment, the artifact was lost here. And one version of the reason is for the monument was destroyed by the fire that rose after the bomb attacking during the Second World War. But according to another version, the artifact was destroyed even earlier during the Citizens' War of 1918 to 1920 in a revolt, or exported abroad for preservation in 1922 when the researcher of the aforementioned parking lot immigrated to Prague. Shikarabakivinsky. Take that. Historians and archaeologists still cannot understand why the original hunters have a calendar, and how they knew the exact time of the phases of the moon and the period of the rotation of the earth around the sun, which is equivalent to a year. But this riddle remains to be solved. And they leave it with that, and a picture of the mammoth in the Royal BC Museum in Victoria, Canada. So they got resources here, and they lock up to a few of them. And the bracelets of Mezin, the oldest calendar, can be available at Arata, Ukraine. Arata. Funny how that area right there in those Caucasus Mountains keep showing an importance, and much later of people coming from that same area and spreading out even more like a ripples on a pond, bringing humanity to everybody, some of which never had it before. So originally when I read this through, I had a few different thoughts of coming to mind, but whenever I got up to the top and decided, okay, let me give a kicker and go, and then I was like, well, I shouldn't even use this picture of a mammoth. I should probably use this. It's more important. It's that swastika thing. Or maybe I should just go and find the other pictures of it and show you the other side of it, or the other one that they had available. But I think it's important to show this side because it shows the wear on the edge, and that there was more to this little artifact than goes on in this armband idea. That somebody would have just run around with this armband on, and on that armband is a calendar. Well, he's got to be a shaman and everything. Does he? Does everything have to be a temple and a shaman, or did people know what the hell was going on? Eggs. Eggs of thought. Wonder what pops out of that egg if you incubate it right. Stone tools. Some of which are conspicuous. Other ones are, Mousterian type style and things that you can see that go back 40,000 years in this collection. So that doesn't show anything to me other than the fact that there's this worked rod right here, which somebody could have called a scepter, but that looks a little too gimp to be a scepter. And there's a little one that looks like it. But the most important artifacts out of this are that ceremonial, what we would always call dagger, and then this grain bowl here. Yeah, they used to make guacamole in it. They'd take avocados and crush them up, and a couple of onions and things, and then take some sea salt, sprinkle it in there, and get some chips going on, man. Yeah, it's about lunchtime around here. So ancient settlements like this, in the Madeleine area, I find it strange sometimes what they name these areas, but I'll go with that. These settlements and dwellings and people coming from a time before time, you look at the last ice age and the way people were living and everything and being able to go back and forth, and so they had somewhat mobile homes. In fact, those ancient proto-Europeans ended up coming up with a wheel to go with these houses, and they put the houses up on wheels and standpoints like a trailer house would be, but trailer houses you can attach wheels to, and now I'll be damned, they had mobile homes and trailer houses and able to move them like Baba Yaga's magic hut in the ancient days. It's going to about do it for this one, guys. On to the next. Peace.